It's time to start making some Christmas ornaments. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today we're going to make some Christmas ornaments, and the cool thing about this Christmas ornament design is that it incorporates a live edge or a natural edge little miniature bowl in the design. So let's jump right into the project and get started. To start this project, we're going to use a limb that's about 3 inches or 6 to 8 centimeters in diameter. And we're going to split this in half. We're actually doing exactly what we were doing with a large log, except it's a much smaller version. Now I'm using the bandsaw for this. You want to be really cautious when using the bandsaw. Now this side cut, because of the fact that this log can roll, is somewhat not as stable as it should be. You're going to want to make sure you've got a lot of leverage. In this case, the limb is pretty long, so I've got a good hold on this, and it's fine. You never do this if your hands are anywhere near that blade. In that case, just use a handsaw to cut the piece. Okay, so now we've got some bowl blanks to go start making our ornament. Now I'm going to use my spur drive center, and then I'm going to balance the blank on the lathe as I bring the tailstock up. Now what's really important here is I want the wings to be evenly matched on each side. So I can do that right now by making sure that I've got the two sides lined up. And the way I do that is I keep my thumb on the tailstock and I see that one side's a little bit higher, so I'll loosen the tailstock and then I will re-tighten that and I'll check it again. And then once I've got that top edge that will be the top of the wings, and once I have that balance, then I can start turning and shaping this bowl shape. Okay, I'm going to be using my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. The first thing I want to do is just remove some of the material in the corners, start getting the shape of the bowl. Now, because I do have bark on this, the bark is relatively thin. If it stays on, great. If it doesn't, that's not a huge deal. But I'm going to try to give it every chance to stay on as possible. So I'm going to do a against the grain cut. In just a moment here. So I've got the shape. It's starting to curve there. I got the shape coming around. Now I'm going to go against the grain here, and the reason I'm doing this is I'm actually pushing, if you think about it, I'm pushing the bark onto the wood instead of going the other way. If I come out onto that loose edge going the opposite way, I'm going to be pushing that bark right off, and there's a good chance I'm going to tear out the bark on the edge there. It's funny because I actually just sped up the lathe, but because of the lights and the strobe effect, it looked like the bowl blank slowed down. So I'm using a push cut to come down, and now I'm using a scraping pull cut, almost like a shear scrape, to shape the bottom curve of this bowl. There you can see the bark staying pretty much intact. And do a little push cut into the center here. I've got to make a tenon. Now I don't need much of a tenon, I just need a very small tenon to hold on to this. I'm not going to be making a foot for this bowl. This is a different project. This is going to be part of an ornament. So I'm actually going to have a flat bottom on this. Use the spindle detail gouge to get in there and clean out the bottom of this tenon. And the point of that spindle detail gouge gets down in there really well and cleans that out. And while I'm here, I'm going to level off the top of that tenon. It's part of the raw surfaces there, and it's not balanced very well. I'm going to make it just a bit deeper. And I'm going to come back and clean out that bottom side with the spindle detail gouge. Okay, so with the tenon established, I'm able to finish shaping the exterior of the bowl. It's kind of difficult to get the tool in there to do a push cut, so I'm going to do a pull cut, kind of a scraping cut here to shape the bottom portion of this piece. I'm calling it a bowl, but it's actually going to be the top portion of our ornament. And this is a great way to practice making a small live edge or natural edge bowl. Everything that we're doing here can be applied to making a larger natural edge or live edge bowl. Now you can see that little high spot in there. I'm going to use a shear scrape. So I'm just using the bottom wing of the bull gouge right now, just to shave off that high spot. And you can see those really fine shavings building up there on the tool rest. All right, that's looking pretty good. There's still a little bit of a high spot there, so I'm going to just take my time. Now, if you're going to work out into the open edge there, the open air edge, you just want to make sure that you're applying pressure down on the tool rest and not into the bowl. Otherwise, your tool is going to go into that void, and you're going to make some smacking sounds. Probably get a nasty catch as well. The tenon needs to be cleaned up a bit here, so I'm going to go ahead and address that again. Now remember, the tenon is super critical. You really want to get that tenon nailed down and get it right each time, because if it's not right, you're going to have issues. And this particular tenon is very small and a very low profile tenon, so I really want to make sure I've got it as clean as possible. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Okay, so we can take this off. And I'm going to put my 4-jaw chuck on. Now that I've got pin jaws in this. This is probably the smallest diameter set of jaws that I have. So I'm going to use these for now. And it's actually going to give me a little bit of extra space for what we're going to be doing in just a minute as well. But I have to remember, I've got a very small grip on this bowl. It's a very thin tenon. Seems to be holding pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start clearing out the inside of this. Again, I'm using my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. Oops. All right, so when I said I had a small tenon on there, it was only gripping just a tiny bit. That aggressive cut that I just made was too much for it, and I got a catch there, so it popped it out. But luckily it didn't damage the tenon, and everything set pretty much true back into the 4-jaw chuck. So I'm going to pick up from there, but I'm going to make a little bit lighter cuts this time. I'm not going to get quite as aggressive as I did on that one. So I'm just going to slowly work the interior down. And I'm going to leave that mass in the middle. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I like to leave that center mass in for stability, especially with a live edge or a natural edge bowl. Those outer wings are going to start flapping at higher speeds and the thinner they get. Now right here, I wanted to show you guys this view. I'm looking straight down. This is my point of view. I actually have the camera in front of my vision. I'm looking through the camera as I'm doing this. The bevel of the bowl gouge is parallel with the exterior of the bowl. That is what I'm lining up here. So I'm watching the bevel edge of the bowl gouge and the outside of the bowl and making sure those are parallel with one another. And with the wings exposed like this, and with the opening of that, of the side wings, you can see down into the bowl, which is really cool. Sorry, I bumped the camera there. Like I said, I'm actually turning the bowl right now through the camera. It's a little different than seeing it firsthand. Okay, so each pass that I'm making here, I'm watching, even right now, even though it's thick, I'm watching the curve of the outside of the bowl, and I'm matching that shape with the bevel of the bowl gouge. And I just keep working my way down until I get to the bottom portion of the thickness that I'm going to establish for this particular piece. Now, I have to apologize. I didn't record a small portion of that, but it wasn't, you didn't miss much. And basically the same thing as what I'm doing right here is I'm basically moving straight in there and making that bevel riding cut right up to the center, watching the exterior of that bowl as I'm doing it. Okay, so I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch drill bit. This is about 6 millimeters. And I'm going to make a hole right through here. And this is what I mentioned earlier. The pin jaws give me extra clearance in the back of this chuck, so I can easily get through the tenon and not worry about the drill hitting the chuck. Now, typically the chuck is hollow in the center, so even if I didn't have those pin jaws, it shouldn't be a problem drilling out that center. That's something we don't usually do, is put a hole in the middle of the bowl we just turned. Okay. So we've got the top portion of our ornament done. Now I've made a jam chuck, and you can make one very simply. Basically start with a piece of scrap wood and shape it to the rough shape of the interior of this. Now what I also created is I created a 1/4 inch nub on the tip of this, and that is designed to fit the hole, the 1/4 inch drilled hole that's in there. And then I'm going to use a little bit of 2-faced tape on this. I'm just going to put a strip on the top and bottom on each side of that little nub for our jam chuck. Now the other thing that I created is I created a little template, and I'll show it to you here in just a minute. I took a piece of metal and I trimmed out a 1/4 inch slot in it. Again, it's about 6 or 7 millimeters wide. And that little slot, I can use it throughout this initially to set this up, and I could size that little nib and make sure the tip of this was the right size. So it didn't have to guess too much, and I didn't have to stop to measure it a whole bunch. Okay, so now we're going to remove the tenon from the bowl. I brought the tailstock up to hold the piece in place. The foam tape is going to do most of the work, but I'm going to use the tailstock for now until I get the majority of this tenon removed. And this is the 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. And then I'm switching to now to my spindle detail gouge to get into that crevice and really sneak in underneath the tailstock. And I just want to make that continuous curve of the bowl go across the top of this. Or I'm saying the top because this is going to be the top of the ornament, but it's typically this would be the bottom of the bowl. This bowl has no foot. It's going to basically be flat across the bottom or curved across the bottom. Now remember, there's a hole in the middle of this, so it'll pop right off, and there's the nub from our jam chuck, and the foam tape did its job very well. So just pop that off. I'll tell you, some of that foam tape can be really aggressive. It holds on very well. I'll put a link to the foam tape. I'll put a link to all of the materials and tools that I'm using in this video in the description below. Okay, so I have a piece of poplar 1x1 or like 2.5 centimeter square stock by 8 or 9 inches long, which is about maybe 15 centimeters or 20 centimeters, somewhere in that range. I'm going to tighten that in. Now I'm using my Spindle Roughing gouge. This is not something you see me typically use when turning bowls, because we never use this tool when turning bowls. This is a tool that's only to be used for spindle turning. What I'm using it for here is to do a peeling cut to quickly round off this stock and bring it down to a nice round shape so we can get started on the next portion of this ornament. You can see that you're getting closer to a continuously round shape, both by rubbing it like that, but you can also see the shavings coming off of it were coming off solid. You're getting longer ribbons. I'm going to use a skew chisel just to make a light indentation here, or a tenon. And now I'm going to reverse this spindle in the chuck. So loosen that up, flip it around, and I'll use that tenon I just created in the jaws. Go ahead and tighten that up nice, and we'll bring the tailstock up for right now just to make sure we've got a good secure connection. You always want to use the tailstock whenever you have the opportunity. If it's in the way, obviously, and you have a secure connection that doesn't need the tailstock, you can remove it and move it out of the way. But most of the time, if you can move the tailstock in, you're going to want to use the tailstock. Okay, so I'm going to use the spindle roughing gouge and continue roughing out this piece of poplar. And I was just thinking, I know this is poplar, but I don't even know what that branch was. That branch was something that I picked up in the ditch. Yeah, it's another piece of ditch wood that I've turned or I collected. I'll collect pretty much any kind of wood. If it looks like it's decent to turn, I will probably pick it up. Here you can see the shavings are getting longer. I'm getting a good continuous peeling cut off of this. Now, this is going to be a long tapered spindle in the center of the ornament. So I'm going to let the end of this piece be the tapered small end of the spindle. So I can rough out a lot of this material quickly with the spindle roughing gouge. And that's what I'm doing right now. And because I love turning bowls and I'm used to my bowl gouge, I'm using my bowl gouge now to do a little shaping. You can use whatever tool works best for you. If you're comfortable with a particular tool, just go ahead and use it. If you're having troubles with it, maybe try a different tool, but there's nothing wrong with it using whatever tool works best for you. Now here I've got the spindle detail gouge, and I'm going to start shaping the tip of this. And we're going to work backwards. We want the smallest, most delicate portion of the spindle to be out on the end here, and we're going to work it forward and finish it up as we go. So as I work this small delicate end, and once I get it finished, I'm not going to go back to this delicate end because it will vibrate and it will cause issues if I try to shape it or change it later. So I'm going to take my time and do all the spindle work right here. And you can use any design you would like. There are a number of different ways that you can create details and designs on a spindle. I know this area back here is going to get thinned out, so I'm going to go ahead and use the roughing gouge to get a bunch of the bulk of this material away quickly. I have to be honest, I don't do a lot of spindle work. I kind of do bowls, a lot of bowls. But spindle work is fun every once in a while. So I kind of bounce around from tools, whatever works best for me. And I know that all of this can be done with a spindle gouge, and that's fine. But that's, again, use what works best for you. So I'm doing a little rolling cut here to create this cove between some of the detail. Just a real simple rolling cut. You want to make sure the bevel's rubbing first. Now, a lot of times you'll get skip backs with this, and that can be common, especially when you're getting started with doing this. If you're getting skip backs, it's probably because you're not letting the bevel rub first. Let the bevel rub and then rotate the tool until the cutting edge is engaged at that point. If that cutting edge engages prior to the bevel rubbing, it almost always will lead to a skip back, and you'll potentially ruin a piece like this, especially when it gets really delicate down to the end of the spindle like this. I think the spindle gouge needs to be sharpened. It's not grabbing and making a nice continuous cut across there. Okay, so I've got pretty much where I'm going to be up at that point. Now I'm going to work backwards. There's a little skip back because I let the tip touch first. Just go ahead and roll the bevel. Now I'm going to come back in here and plow this out with the detail roughing gouge. Now obviously you want to use light pressure working on a very, very delicate little spindle like this. I think, I don't know, I might be wrong here, but I think that I'm about ready for my 150 grit gouge. Yep, that's what I'm going to do right now. This is 150 grit sandpaper. I really like doing little spindles like this. You can actually do a lot of shaping and fine tuning of the design with just sandpaper. You can't really change a bowl design too much with just sandpaper, but you can do that with a spindle. This is cleaning up those rough edges nicely. You want to be careful putting the paper in between a little cove like that because it will round it off. If you get a nice sharp edge there, it will round it off. But that rough area that you saw there, this is being cleaned up really nicely with the sandpaper. Okay, now I'm not going to go back out to that tip. If I start working out there, there's going to be some vibration, so I'm just going to forget that area. Now I kind of want to put a sphere or a ball shape in this spindle, so I'm going to clear away some material and start shaping a spherical ball shape inside the spindle. Now I'm letting the bevel rub, and then I'm just rotating the spindle gouge over to the side, down into the cove. I want to be careful not to get that other wing engaged on the opposite side because that can make a nasty catch as well. So for instance, right here, I don't want to engage on the left side, and right here I don't want to engage on the right side. I just want to bring the tip in there. That's why I like this detail gouge. It's a little more pointed than a standard spindle gouge. Now the sphere shape is starting to form there. It's not quite there, obviously, but I'm going to go ahead and shape the area above the sphere a bit. Need to remove some material there. You kind of just make it up as you go if you want. I mean, obviously you can take an existing design and replicate that if you'd like, but you don't have to do that. It's kind of fun just to kind of see how the shape evolves as you move along. So I'm going to sand this a bit and take down some of those high spots. I still have a little bit of a wonky shape to the top of this sphere. It's not quite round enough, so I'm going to round that off in just a minute with the detail gouge, just a little bit more. But there you can see how the sandpaper takes away those high spots and makes this relatively round pretty quick. Yeah, I'm going to get in there and just take that little bit of that extra material away right there. So this looks more like a ball or a sphere. I'm going to go ahead and shape this a bit more while I'm here as well. Now this will connect to the inside portion of the bowl. If we were to think of it as a bowl, it'll be the inside of the bowl or up underneath that. And this is going to be hanging down from our ornament. You could do a bunch of these different designs. You could try to make the design similar or make each one of them the same if you want. It's a bit of a challenge. Or you can make each of the spindles different. You might make a bunch of these ornaments for the tree. It's all up to you. Obviously, we're just having fun with this, and the shape can be anything you'd like. Okay, I'm going to use my narrow parting tool, and I'm going to part away the bottom of this. I'm going to part a somewhat concave area. I'm going to come in a bit of an angle so that this will seat flush with the surface of the inside of the bowl when we insert it into the ornament. You can see I'm working away an area. I want this, there's going to be a small shaft that's going to go up through the ornament, and this is going to be the connecting portion that will connect the bottom to the top of the ornament. And here you can see the angle where I'm going slightly to the right or up into that. So that way the outer shape of this will seat flat on the inside of the ornament. Okay, and I created this gauge. I mentioned it earlier, but this is just a piece of sheet metal, and I cut a 1/4 inch notch in it. And I've been using that notch to make sure that I get these little shaft portions exactly a 1/4 inch. Again, that's about 6 or 7 millimeters. So I can do a little area and check it. Still not quite wide enough. And then I can come in and just shave just a little bit more and test it again. You want to be careful with this. You obviously don't want to have the lathe running when you got this. Got a little bit of a sharp edge to it because it's sheet metal. But there you can see the gauge. It's just a real simple little primitive template. Okay, so I've got the space set up so it's consistent with all of the other ornaments I'm going to be doing. And now I just need to clear away the material to match that. I'm always amazed how this spindle turns so smoothly and so stable with such a small connecting portion. If you look at the right side of it, there's hardly any vibration or anything in it. And the only thing connecting it to the lathe is this little 1/4 inch section of wood right here. So I'm going to smooth this out, make sure that it's all right at about a 1/4 inch or a little less, so that it'll fit through the hole that we've made. That's the other reason for making that template, because there's no way to check and see if this fits the hole of the bowl until it's removed from the piece of wood. Okay, so this looks like it's going to be the right size. Now I'm just going to take a small saw. This is a Japanese saw, and the reason I use the Japanese saw is it has such a narrow kerf. We're talking a very, very small space of wood that are removed, so I don't lose a whole bunch of that nub. Okay, so we have the bottom part of the spindle created. Now we're going to make the top of the ornament. I'm going to clean away the material that we have here. And I have my tool rest a little too low. You saw it skip around there. The cutting point that we want, the bowl gouge, the part of the bowl gouge that's actually cutting needs to be right on the center line. Just like that. And you can tell because you're cutting right into the center. And you want to adjust your tool rest so that you're meeting that cutting edge. Now I'm going to put a little indentation here with the spindle detail gouge. And that indentation is going to be designed to accept the drill bit. I'm going to go ahead and drill out a 1/4 inch hole. Same drill bit, 1/4 inch or 6 or 7 millimeters. And I'm going to go in a small distance here, not super far, just enough that I can get the shaft that we created in there. And I'm marking this. I can see that it's the distance there. I'm just measuring it with my fingers. And I'm going to put a mark on the outside of this so I have an idea of where that hole is located so that I don't go and turn that out. Okay, again, using the parting tool, I'm going to create a small tenon. And then I'm going to flip this piece around so that it seats in the tenon. Now that we have the hole to receive it, and we can see that the hole goes up to about that pencil line. Now we can shape the top of the ornament. And you can play with this as well. You can do a variety of different designs or looks to this, whatever you'd like. One thing you want to make sure is that the top of this, or the finial, is tall enough to have a hole put in it so that you can put a ribbon or a wire on it so you can hang this ornament. And the way I'm going to put that hole in, I'm going to actually put the hole in now. I'm using an awl here to make a hole, or a starting point. And then with the drill, I'm using a smaller drill bit. And the first thing I'm going to do is run the drill backwards. So that will start a little area so it doesn't skip all over there and cause a big mess. And that'll give us a good clean cut. Now it's tearing out wood on both sides. But I did this, I drilled it before I was done with the finishing cuts here. Now when I make this finishing cut over that, I'm going to remove all of that ripped out wood material. And we got a nice clean surface there. And then we'll have a hole to accept the top portion of the, or to accept the wire or ribbon so that we can hang this piece. Again, we're going to sand that. Just sand it smooth. It's kind of fun sanding on a spindle piece because it's much quicker than sanding bowls. And sanding all the different surfaces and all the grain directions on a bowl. Okay, so now I'm going to continue shaping this piece. Kind of mentally need to keep track of where that depth of the hole is for the piece, so I don't get too aggressive and make this too narrow and expose that hole that we drilled out just a little bit ago. Remember to rub the bevel first and then roll into the cut. That way you don't get a skip back. Don't want to get that too narrow up there because it's going to be a little bit too small, but we'll make this work. And it's best to use dry, really good dry material for the spindle portion of this, so you're not getting movement in the piece. This happens to be a piece of dried lumber, or lumber scrap that I'm using, so I know it's actually kiln drying. Okay, so now the top of the bowl, or the top of the ornament, is going to be curved. So I really want to make sure that I'm coming in under this at an angle, so that I've got the bottom of the top portion is going to be convex, so it seats flat. You can see how I'm going at an angle to the right. Just take your time, go slow. You don't have to get this out quickly. There, it's coming loose, and it popped right out. That hole, it's funny, having the hole in the piece in the center of it made it act all odd. Okay, so there's the top portion. So now all we do is we take the bottom spindle, place it up into the hole of the bowl, and now we've got a tab for the top portion. Apply a little bit of glue to that connection right there, and that's all you need. The entire piece is complete at that point. It's a great project. So there you have it. It's a really cool looking Christmas ornament, a really neat design, and I love that it incorporates a live edge bowl in it as well. Now you can decorate this any way you want. You could stain it, you could color it, you can apply finish, you can make it shiny, whatever you'd like. Obviously, you're only limited by your imagination. You can also attach a little ribbon or a wire so that you can hang this in the tree. And it really wouldn't be hard to knock out a couple dozen of these in a weekend. I would probably do all the bowls first and then maybe turn all the spindles separate. And if you're using that little guide, in this case I'm using that 1/4 inch guide for that inside shaft, if I'm matching that up with all of them, actually the spindles and the top parts are all interchangeable. So you can kind of fit them and figure out which ones match best and make a whole bunch of them. All right, if you've liked this video, do me a huge favor and click that like button at the bottom of the screen. I greatly appreciate that. And if you're not subscribing, please click that subscribe button and check out all my other videos and check out my website, Turn a Wood Bowl. turnawoodbowl.com is my website. I've got tons of information there all about turning wood bowls. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to want to check that out if you're even remotely considering or interested in turning wood bowls. And if you've been turning wood bowls for a long time, you're going to find a lot of information there to help you as well. All right, guys, until next time, as I always like to say, happy turning.